Welcome to the Nomad Futurist podcast, where ideas shape the future and visionaries redefine what's possible. Join us as we dive deep into the evolution of technology, society, and human potential, spotlighting the voices driving change and reimagining our world. Connect with us and join us at media.nomadfuturist.org. The future is a story we write together. Let's kick it off. Here are your hosts, Phil and Nabeel.
Hello. Welcome to Nomad Futurist. This is your co-host, Nabeel Mahmood, calling in from Waikoloa, Hawaii.
This is your co-host, Phillip Koblence, calling in from Montclair, New Jersey.
Phil, this is it. This is the end of the year. Can't believe that we are in with our 6 seasons with Nomad Futurist podcast.
It's hard to believe. I go to, at the end of the summer, we start prepping for things, and then Halloween comes, and then every year, it doesn't matter how early they start, the Christmas carols and the decoration changing and the CVS's and the Costco's and the Home Depots, every year, this time of year sneaks up on me, and I don't get it. There's 6 seasons of Nomad in the can. There's 47 seasons of Phil in the can, and every year I'm like, oh my God, tomorrow is Christmas. How could that possibly be? Even though I'm hearing silver bells from like September. So it's crazy. The years certainly keep moving faster and faster, which I always thought my grandparents were lying to me about, but it seems to be true. And this year is no exception. If anything, the fastest yet.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the definition of getting old. But let's go back to the fact that we have already had 6 seasons. It doesn't feel like another year. It feels like a turning point. So based on what we have experienced, particularly in 2025, does anything stand out for you as far as the milestones that we might have achieved as Nomad Futurist, the foundation, and milestones that we've been able to achieve as a media podcast platform?
I think in general, the thing about just being out there in the way that we're out there, it's like the data center industry itself. Like 6 years ago, I was still explaining to people what I did for a living and nobody would understand what I'm talking about. And then now people are coming up to me from parts of my life that never had any interest in what I did for a living, being like, wait, you're in that industry that's on the news, that's spiking our electric rates, that's taking up 80% of the gross domestic product in the US. I feel some similarities to the fact that we go now to these conferences and people come up to us and they're like, what you guys are doing is super important. And people are seeking us out to try to see how they can help. And I feel like the message of bringing the industry together to solve a common problem has really seeped through in a way that you kind of expect is going to happen, because we're not just doing this just to hear ourselves speak. And maybe it started out that way a little bit 6 years ago, 7 years ago, but it's incredible to watch the type of response we've gotten as an organization, not just from the listeners of the podcast, not just from the folks that we've worked with for some time, but from actual students that we've been able to engage, from conference organizers that are welcoming us to their conferences to try to create student tracks, which were only kind of fostered by this idea that we threw out there that let's bring students to where the industry is. And we tried it with DCD a couple times in New York, but I think this year more than any, that OCP conference that we had in October, where we were able to get 75, 80 students, many of them flown from around North America as far as Canada, and we were able to fly them in and get them to actually dedicate a track at OCP to the students, give them a curated tour of the floor where we're not just talking to them about the various technologies. 5 minutes after we taught them about immersion cooling or suggested what it was, they were sticking their fingers in a vat of mineral oil or the liquid that they actually had on display on the show floor. And it was just an incredible kind of period or exclamation point at the end of what has been a breakneck pace for the last 7 seasons of the podcast and the last, what seems like 50 years of the foundation, but really is only 2 or 3. And it's gotten me so revved up for what we can accomplish in 2026 and beyond that I can't believe we're still on this roller coaster.
We recently had this conversation about that we used to be a topic of discussion. Now we are the topic of discussion. That's probably the best quote I've heard so far this year.
We used to be a thing, now we're
the thing, yes. And just looking at 2025, and what's different now is that the conversations are turning into commitments. it was just a talk or a vision before. And I clearly, explicitly remember us sitting in Hawaii at PTC 6 years ago and this crazy idea of demystifying technology for the masses. And you and I being the oldest, and we were still in our early 40s. We were the oldest, yet we were the youngest in the group to start seeing a bit of a change, that there is that level of diversity being encouraged, and we've started to see that difference. So the industry isn't asking if the change is coming anymore. I believe what we've been able to accomplish thus far is actually enable us, and they're asking now how fast and who's actually doing the work. And it's good to be in a position to be able to take that crazy dream that we had at PTC 6+ years ago and be able to showcase what we've been able to accomplish thus far. Now, before we get into some of the other fun stuff as the year end closes over here, let's take a look at 2025 in review, the data center and the technology landscape. What do you think has happened, particularly in 25, that's different than the years before? And what is that acceleration path of some of the technology stack that's coming to the forefront? And why are all of a sudden we are so important? Why are we so relevant now?
I think the kind of AI conversation, which started in maybe 2023 and 2024, just accelerated to this breakneck pace in 2025 in a way that people were coming into this industry from all walks. You had farmers walking around a lot of these conferences saying that they had the next big data center campus because they were power adjacent and it was more valuable for them to be part of the digital infrastructure community than it was to focus on planting crops. And I think it's shined a spotlight on some of the limitations of the power grid. We've had a lot more conversations about some of the behind the meter kind of power generation technologies. We've had Yuval on a couple of times at this point in the podcast talking about what he's doing with hydrogen. You have a lot of natural gas folks talking about what to do with bridging. A huge conversation this year around like fundamental nuclear power and what the real solutions are and what the timeline is. We've had Brian Smith on. We've talked to our good friend Tony Grayson in a couple of different platforms where we're trying to bring some of clarity to elements of the industry that are intentionally being obfuscated or complicated, because ultimately there's so much money coming towards our industry in this race that we're in to get that next big contract, to get the next gigawatt campus under construction, that sometimes we fail as a great broader society to bring up those people that are just watching the world move by them and don't really understand it. So I really appreciate our focus on trying to, the word demystification, I think, is a great one. But in reality, it's not that we're trying to dumb it down. It's like we're trying to pump the brakes so you can see like the hype from the reality and what is the realistic timeline, what is actually happening. How can we bring other people in so they can see a stake in the outcome of digital infrastructure development within their communities? Some of the stuff that are happening with a lot of our partner organizations, whether it's iMasons or OIX or AVCOM or 7x24, a lot of it has become this kind of community engagement piece, which I really feel like we started that concept of trying to get people to recognize how to engage with these communities. So you can't just tell them about where the future is going, but bring them along with you for the ride.
Very well articulated. So if I was to just summarize all of it, you talked about artificial intelligence, and I believe it didn't just scale up last year, but it scaled compute and it exposed every weak link in the infrastructure whereby it's becoming a major topic of discussion. You talked a bit about energy and sustainability and water, right? I believe that they are no longer just talking points. Those conversations are getting a bit more serious and getting into the boardroom where decisions are being rendered, and even at the government levels. We talked about talent, education, and workforce gaps. And as it stands, and if I was to just have one quote from Nabeel, so the biggest bottleneck I see isn't technology, it is people and being prepared to fulfill this capital deficit and ensuring that we do right things for the right reasons as we enter into 2026 and the years beyond.
No doubt. I think we come from a generation of digital infrastructure folks. We talked about this recently on a podcast where we had the luxury of trying to understand how all of this stuff was made, why it was made. We were solving problems in real time to really create the foundational elements that power our digital world. But at a time when there was no data center for dummies, we had to figure it out. as we went along. And along with that, which is simply by happenstance, simply by the year we were born, the year we entered our professional careers, the year where we broke our backs on a polo pony or whatever and decided to change our careers. And because of that timeline, we were able to come in at the ground level of what built the underlying elements of the internet. And as a consequence of that completely accidental timeline that we happen to live in, we have a perspective on this industry that allows us to not be kind of taken up by a lot of the hype. We do not have the luxury for the students that are coming into the workforce now that are potentially on career paths that may be disrupted by AI, where they have the luxury of the time to like figure it all out because of this pace with which this innovation is going. And I think what we have built is really to try to address that element of it, to create this kind of safe ecosystem where we can kind of give them the building blocks so that they can fundamentally understand the purpose behind all of the different elements of this kind of AI hype cycle that will eventually extend to AI 2.0 with inferencing, and then the coming wave of quantum technologies, and then nuclear power is going to come in. And there's going to be all these ebbs and flows. But unless you understand like why it's all happening, the history of it, then it's going to be difficult to have that kind of matter-of-fact approach that is the baseline of all successful people in industry. Just understand those fundamental elements of it. And I think that's why what we're doing is so vital.
Do you want to talk about what's projected in 2026? What's your vision? What are we expecting as far as technology and what we are doing as a foundation?
From a technology perspective, we're going to continue on this. You like to refer to it as a hockey stick style approach. There's going to be inevitable pullbacks, as I think Barack Obama said in his final speech. History rarely moves in a straight line. So there's a lot of zigzagging that's going to get us there. But I think the adoption of increasing technology solutions to every fundamental problem, from healthcare to banking to every possible area that you can imagine, and the kind of automation that's going to be brought to it as these large language models continue to develop across every industry is going to continue to accelerate, which is going to require that we continue deploying data. Maybe we're not going to talk about these never-ending pipeline of developments, because basically 2025 seemed like the year where we were planning these massive developments that are going to be powered in 28 and 29 and 2030. But I think we are at the point where the rubber needs to hit the road, and we need to actually see some of these sites start coming online and deploying some of this capacity. So that's what I think 2026 is going to be about a lot. And as a foundation, our goal is going to be to really drive the actual acceleration of getting in front of students and really creating these kind of regional ecosystems where it's not just about the Nabeel and Phil show and us traveling around as many places as possible, because that is not scalable. And trying to make sure that we have an engaged ambassadorship and advocates that are actually committed to doing the work, accountable to try to get in front and share their passion for this industry with the younger generation, with folks in transition, with folks that want to have a stake in the outcome of all of this digital infrastructure development that's on the front page of every paper, it's in every news article, is all over CNBC, is responsible, as I said, for 90% of GDP growth in this country. It is absolutely imperative that we have an ecosystem that is engaged and accountable, and we're simply creating the umbrella with which they can get out in their communities and preach, baby, preach.
I love it. I think what I'm most proud of is that we did not wait for permission. We rolled our sleeves, we started it, and we're getting it done. And I think it's been a bit challenging as well in the earlier part of us converting our podcast into being a nonprofit. And it's only been about for 3 years. And I know you and Phil and others continually tell me that we are making progress. It's not as fast as I would like it to be, but we are certainly making progress.
I think all of our listeners assume that you're the calm, cool, collected one sitting in Kailua Kona, just sipping your Mai Tais and just waiting for the world to come to you. And I'm the one that is out there trying to break as many eggs to make this omelet as possible. And it is almost exactly the opposite. It is me being like, just calm down. It's not going to be as fast as you want it, but it is going to happen. We've always suggested that the imperfection is the perfection in all these, and that we don't have all the answers, and that all the people that we have, even the folks that we have that are engaged with the organization for money, their careers are not defined by what they're going to make from the foundation. So this is a volunteer army, essentially, that we are creating, and they all have responsibilities, and trying to get people to just point in the right direction, make sure their heart is in the right place, and leverage their capabilities towards a greater good is not easy. And I think that's at the crux of what we're trying to do, is create a framework under which people can take ownership of disseminating their passion, what they need for, what they love about the industry, and bridge the gap that clearly is not being bridged by the evolution of the education system, which I think we've been talking about now for the last 6 years.
Yeah, and we're probably, I would say, getting closer to making a big difference and contributing to it. Just a couple of things that you talked about. I want to share that we have actually shown that a global initiative, a global foundation can move fast and still stay very, very grounded. I clearly remember us having this conversation that we're not going to be a marketing, a branding, or a soliciting organization. We're going to value our core principles, that is to bridge the human capital gap that we've got, to connect all the silos that are in our space. And it's not about self-promotion or promoting a product, company, or services. It's about doing the right thing for the right reason and building pathways. So we leave just a little bit of legacy that we actually contributed to this planet. And for instance, sustainability and the Climate Accord and other charters became buzzwords for a long time, whereby we're trying to build that muscle memory early on with the younger generation so that they can make the right decisions. And granted, it's all about education, experience, exposure, and making sure that they've got the right tools. So progress has been made. I will continue to strive towards making a major difference and contribution. So I want to take this opportunity and thank every advocate, everybody that's voiced what we are doing, every ambassador, our advisory board, and of course, the entire Nomad Futurist team that's committed and dedicated in making this difference. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
It's incredible, the efforts that they make. It's incredible how people, I remember having this conversation, I think it was last year on the end of the year podcast. It's incredible to me that some idea that we had is something that can spark a flame in someone else. They agree with this mission that we set out. And you see it in any time we go to one of these conferences. We've started, I think, in 2025, more than most, having our ambassadors essentially represent us without it just being us. More and more in 2025, we see a lot more of that happening in 2026. And you can just see the passion with which they talk about the Nomad Futurist mission. And it's heartening, it's humbling, and it's incredible to watch. And I think it's because it resonates. We're trying to shoot first, ask questions later. It's not education in that formal sense where we're trying to create a classroom and having people sit down. It's really about providing the perspective that we have and just showing folks what all of this hype, all of this stuff they've talked about, like what it is. And I think never has it been more real to me than when we saw it at OCP and we saw all those students engaging with all the ambassadors and Scott Charter and Anahita and Jody and Rob Coyle, Phil Lawson-Shanks, Vic Rose. I'll just continue to say names. It's just incredible to watch. It's almost like a parent watching their child to develop a personality, and just watching these folks be able to engage with students and explain what they do and what the digital infrastructure is, and just to sit back and watch that and to feel as though any of that is as a consequence of any effort that we've made is so humbling that in and of itself is more fulfilling than any payday or transactional and any of those kind of commercialized things. It's incredible, the groundswell of support that Nomad Futurist has created. I not only do I want to thank the entire advocacy and just anyone that shows their support whenever they see us or get on a call with us, but I want to thank you for clearly this message is more appropriately delivered by someone that really has the voice and the story that generates that kind of emotional response, and that is you. I think when you posted that picture of you being Maui going to PTC, And then I was like, funny, that's what I see when I go in the mirror. It was the Kokomora on the side that I was referring to. So I feel like it's your energy and passion that has really brought this stuff to the fore and inspiring people every day, and wouldn't be possible without you being so committed to the mission. So from all of us, I think I could speak for the ambassadorship and the advisors and the advocates and all the employees that you drive crazy. To you, thank you for your passion.
Well, and thank you for your friendship and being my brother in driving this forward. Let's look at 2026 and the year ahead, based on conversations that you and I had and with the board and the team. What lies ahead for the foundation? Where do we want to be in the next year to 4?
I think our main focus is to try to make it as self-sustaining as possible. Towards the end of the year, we were lucky enough to get Kelly Santalucia on as an executive director towards the end of the year in September, with her and Julia and Luciana really trying to create a set of committee structures within the foundation to try to drive a lot of these efforts forward, because ultimately it is going to be impossible to scale unless we have accountability for all these things. I think we talk about it as a very kind of specific mission, which is to demystify technology and to essentially get people to recognize what their careers could be within the broader digital infrastructure industry. But there are so many things that we need to do, from building out the academy and working with our partners to continue to create valuable content that everyone has access to coordinating with the schools and onboarding new schools and communities and identifying the areas in which we need ambassadors and advocates so that we can continue to run programs globally. I think we're going to start in 2026. We're bringing on the ANZ region, the Australia and New Zealand part of the world, where we're going to have a corporation specifically set up down there so we can engage with the folks in that area and they can benefit from all the things that our European and North American partners have been able to benefit from us starting up here. And I think it's just incredible to watch, but I think the focus is going to be on making sure that we are putting in place a framework that will outlive us and that will create the ability for us to scale at an ever increasing rate without trying to introduce new bottlenecks, and certainly without us being the bottlenecks.
If I was to summarize that, I would say that the next phase for us as Nomad Futurist, the foundation, is about depth, not just reach. It's about scaling programs without losing our core values and the authenticity that we've built it on. It's going to be about stronger partnerships and measurable outcomes. And at the end of the day, if we're not creating real opportunities, we're just missing the point. So we want to be able to focus on those core principles. We've never really actually hosted an event, Bill.
I will call into question that. We did have a little happy hour in New York for DCD New York. So we did host a tiny, teeny event, but we never had our own kind of Nomad Futurist branded event where we try to embody all of our things. And we are the showrunner as it is. Are you suggesting that we will do that in 2026?
Well, I think so we are. And we're going to be launching Mana Hui at PTC. Share the English version or the American version of Mana Hui with our audience.
Mana Hui, for my non-Hawaiian speaking friends, means powerful gathering. We look at our core, our soul is in the islands of Hawaii. Everything from the logo, which is the banyan tree, which I know is not native to Hawaii. I know it's native to other regions, but some of the most beautiful banyan trees on the planet are in Hawaii. And just the notion of trying to take that kind of inspirational ethos. We will have the first Mana Hui event at PTC in January, and our goal is going to be to try to bring it global and have leaders that share the promise of the Nomad Futurist Foundation mission kind of gather and get together and focus on how we can kind of bridge the human capital deficit, but also demystify digital infrastructure and bring communities into the conversations globally. So I have really high hopes for the first one in January. It does not hurt that it's going to be in beautiful Honolulu in the depths of January, but I think hopefully it becomes a regular occurrence at conferences and alongside events globally starting in 2026 and then beyond.
Yeah, and just to add, it's about cultural respect, inclusion, and engagement from the leadership within the technology and the data center sector. And of course, being in Hawaii, grounded in the conversations and the view, it's about respect, culture, and responsibility. And the gathering isn't ever going to be about a black tie affair or about visibility. It's about alignment and doing the right things and holding each other accountable. Phil, this has been an amazing journey thus far. And I believe one of the things that you said a while ago, that Nomad Futurist at the core is basically like a tide. Like when it rises, it brings all the boats up together. And we want to emphasize on that going into 26 and the years beyond, that it's about collaboration and partnerships. It's not just about us as a charter or as an ownership or an organization. It's about us collaborating within the industry with plenty other initiatives that are regional or national in nature, and exposing them and collaborating on a global platform. The industry, I believe, doesn't need spectators. We don't want people to be sitting at the sidelines and being the coaches. What we need is that 1% of engagement and involvement and contribution. So please step up. Don't plan to do it tomorrow, do it today. Be a part of the mission and contribute in any way, form, or shape that you can, and hold yourselves accountable and responsible, because you're going to leave a bit of legacy behind for your children and their families. So be a part of the change, and not just sit on the sidelines would be my ask.
No doubt. I think the concept of bringing not just people together, but initiatives, foundations, organizations, companies together for a common purpose, and really trying to engage with communities globally that are inevitably going to be where digital infrastructure takes root, is incredibly important. So it's been an amazing ride thus far. We are still unbelievably just at the beginning of it, and I can't wait to see what 2026 and beyond brings.
Well, the future is something we're waiting on. It's something we're building together. So with that, thank you so much for being a part of the journey with us. Maliki Maka from Hawaii. You can see a little bit of Christmas behind me. Phil, thank you very much for your friendship and be a part of this journey. Really appreciate you, my friend. And thank you, everybody. I look forward to seeing you guys in 2026, wishing everyone the best. And I'm optimistic, not because it's easy, but because I believe that everyone's stepping up their game a bit. Thank you.
Love you guys. Happy New Year.
Thank you for joining us on the Nomad Futurist podcast. Remember, technology, markets, and challenges will continue to evolve, but those who adapt and prepare are the ones who will thrive. Embrace the change, stay curious, and let's build a future worth moving towards. The journey has just begun, and we're glad you're here with us. Visit us anytime at media.nomadfuturist.org to stay connected and be a part of the movement. Until next time, keep exploring.